This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 374 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we are talking about cultural intelligence for travellers. Let me first pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation on this beautiful land where I'm recording this podcast today. So, on to my cultural intelligence and what you can learn about cultural intelligence too. Now, earlier this year, I connected with Renae Ninneman. You might remember Renae from episode 358. She had a story about women travelling solo. But through chatting with Renae, I learnt about her business, which offers intercultural training. So when Renae said that she could guide me through doing a cultural intelligence assessment and then give me a debrief like she does with her clients, I was like, yes, that sounds so fascinating. I really love all aspects of cultural differences. And of course, I have lived and worked in Australia, Japan, Slovakia, and Germany. So I've definitely had some longer term exposure to different cultures as well, not just from shorter trips. So I have lots of thoughts about it and I was super interested to get involved. So we decided to record our debrief too. So I'm sharing just a few highlights from it was a more than 2-hour session. So fascinating. But I've cut a lot, obviously. It's taken me ages to figure out exactly what small bits to share to give you a flavour. So, but it was so interesting. So Renae has qualifications from the Cultural Intelligence Centre, which uses the CQ model to look at these cultural issues.
CQ, we got EQ and IQ, right? We got all these different kinds of intelligence. And so what, this model particularly speaks about is CQ as a skill. And that's an important aspect of it. It's a skill that everybody can get better at, everybody can practice. And so, the goal is that it's empowering. I really like it. But I mean, I kind of read a lot of books just for fun on this topic because it's really just a passion of mine. And so I draw inspiration from other models. So there's one by Erin Meyer called the Culture Map. That's also really popular. There's also a model called the IDI, Intercultural Development Index, I think. That I like that one because there's different levels of cultural understanding where denying difference is at the base and then all the way up to adaptation. So they will measure how advanced you are on this continuum, which a little bit the CQ does, but the IDI does it in a little different way. So I just, I soak it all up. I like it all.
It is a very cool area.
It's so fun. What I really want to do is bring the knowledge to more people. More people just need this because the world is becoming more interconnected and it should not be limited to corporations. And also because people are touring, right? They're going as tourists around the world. And that's how the primary way that we are interacting with each other around the world. And so I think this is really important for everybody if they're traveling internationally. And so that's originally why I started this, just to sort of share it with more, teach more people these skills. So a lot of times people have this general concept of oh, I know it's culture, right? I know something strange is happening in this situation. Must be cultural differences. And then they sort of just leave it.
There's no unpacking at all. It's just, oh, that's different or weird. Full stop.
I think there's a lot of reasons behind that. But overall, it's okay to talk about cultural differences, And what I really like about these models is that you can bring up differences in sort of a peaceful way. We're not saying that this is better than that. We're just saying that we're different and let's just acknowledge it and understand how each other operate. And then we will just get along so much better.
So from the moment I began traveling, but especially when in my 20s I moved to live in Japan, where of course there are really significant cultural differences, I have been super interested in this topic. But Renae is totally next level. She is qualified in this topic. So I was so keen to do this whole process. Ahead of our debrief meeting, Renae sent me their assessment task. So it's a CQ assessment, which is basically measuring cultural intelligence, to put it simply. Basically, basically, it's a series of statements, and I needed to indicate my level of agreement or disagreement. So I thought I'd give you a couple of examples. So one was, I modify the amount of warmth I express to fit the cultural context. So I said strongly agree for this one. I think I do this both with my physical expressions of warmth, like whether I would give someone a hug or not, and in my words as well. For example, I used to teach English here in Perth, and so simultaneously I had a lot of Brazilian students who I think are a very warm expressing culture, and I would speak to them very differently to how I'd speak with my Korean or Japanese students, for example, so as not to overwhelm the latter. Another assessment item was, I change my use of pause and silence to suit different cultural situations. I answered neutral on this one. But yeah, being brutally honest, I know I should do this sometimes, but I really love to talk, and I'm not very good at pause and silence. And I recognize there's definitely cultures where this is more appropriate, but I have not adjusted very well. So anyways, tons of those kinds of questions. And the result comes back based on my responses. Renae was able to send me a report, I think it's about 20 pages long, which summarized my cultural intelligence scores. Sorry, 20 pages long sounds long. It's a lot of graphs and brief information. It was super interesting. So here it showed my cultural intelligence scores, and then we met to debrief and for her to teach me some more about some of these and think about potential actions as a result. So we chatted at length initially about the behavioural preferences that my test revealed for me. They're for 10 different areas. The testing places you on a continuum for each area. So the first one, I'm only going to share a couple of these, obviously, or we would be here all day, but the first one was individualism versus collectivism. And I ended up in the middle, but with a tendency towards individualism.
And we're really addressing the under the iceberg cultural stuff. This is not language and dress. It's the way we treat each other and interact and the way we view ourselves and view our community and everything like that. So what we're going to do, we'll start out by reflecting on your own culture and your own behaviors, and then kind of, talking about how that behavior, how behaviors can show up in other people, and then also about adapting and adjusting behavior. So individualism is the extent to which you think of yourself primarily as an individual or as a member of a specific group, like your family or a work group or a neighborhood or a city or a region. This is usually one of the values that a lot of people are familiar with, and they understand it, and they're like, oh yeah, I get that, and that it's talked about a lot, right? Well, I feel like especially in the US, where we are off the charts individualistic, it's gone rampant just a tad.
That's the context we talk about it most as well in discussing America. So
the individualism is so baked in for centuries, right? And a lot of this stuff is so fascinating because the culture is so deeply rooted. And when you start to reflect and see and think about, why are we like this, it gets pretty deep. And it also just helps you understand yourself a little bit better. And I will always say, I'm an American. It is who I am, right? I can't change who I am. I know I come from an individualistic culture. I know that's the way I think, right? This particular model will tell you, you don't need to change, right? There's nothing wrong
it's just who
with
you
any
are.
of these cultural values. It's just who you are, and it's just different, right? That's the only thing. And so, again, not being afraid of addressing the differences. So when I enter into a meeting or a conversation with someone who's Japan super collectivist, I can be aware of my own thoughts and patterns.
And understand theirs in some, not think, God, they're so weird. Why would they do that?
Exactly. Because I know I can have an idea of why. So Australia and the US and England and, these white Anglo, they were lumped together in the Anglo category. So that's how they put us.
Sure.
And our cultures overlap a lot. They're very similar, but we're still different, right? We still have some significant differences across cultures. But for individualism and collectivism, I think it's really interesting. When I first learned about this, it was after I lived in South Korea, and my mind was just you mean they don't even think of themselves as an individual? And it still blows my mind sometimes. I can't even fathom myself besides as myself, right? Not as a
Same.
member of a group. And so I don't exist to like defer to the group. I exist for my own self and my own rights and my happiness and all that kind of stuff. Like, do what makes you happy.
I like to think of the greater good, but when it comes down to it, if I have a choice, then of course I'm individualistic. Yeah.
One of the questions that's always a hot button topic for this particular value is if there's a student, should the student choose their own major or should the family choose the major for them?
Wow. Yeah, right. And so to me, of course, the student should do it 100%. It seems so clear to me, but of course there are cultures where that's absolutely not the case.
And see, this is where like it can be, well, what do you mean your dad told you you had to study medicine and you want to be an artist? Like, that's wrong.
To us, it's completely wrong. Yeah, but I see. It's a good clarifying question.
These hot button questions, you find a good one, you know? And to them, like, what do you mean you wouldn't study what your parents ask you to do? How could you be so disrespectful of your family?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you ask some of these like questions, it really gets to the core, like, who are you really, you know?
Yeah.
And where do you really identify? And so you were sort of middling with individualism.
Yes. Interesting.
That is interesting. Australia, I think, you know, I would definitely expect you to be more collectivist than me.
Yes. Yeah.
But you were pretty close to the middle. So that's interesting. So then we're going to talk about power distance next. And you were low on power distance, which is pretty typical for a Westerner. And this is also one that a lot of people sort of understand a lot. You know, the extent to which you prefer a flat egalitarian approach to leadership, which is low power distance, or a more top-down hierarchical leadership style, which is high power distance. And so the dominant norm in most cultures around the world is high power distance. In a lot of ways, us in the US, in the West, this concept of like, hey, buddy, we're all equal is antithetical to even the concept of like, how do you show respect? It's really interesting because like how people earn respect in different cultures is different, right? It can be age. It can be like how long you've been in the company. In the US, it's like, how much money do you have?
I say here, it's often by your actions. Like in Australia, we always say, I don't know, we are quote unquote proud of the fact that if you met the Prime Minister, you would always call them by their first name and have a chat about sport. You know, like that's the kind of approach we have that, you know, the Prime Minister is just one of us.
That's super low power distance. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Again, being in a lot of college settings, my question is always, do you call your professor by their first name? Or another question to ask is like, how do you address people, right? Because like how they earn their status can vary. And then how you show respect can vary.
Yes.
It's tricky. Like, who do I show respect to? And how do I show it to them? But for a lot of people from low power distance, and you probably felt this in Japan, it feels weird.
Yep.
It's hard.
Yeah, I don't like it. Yeah. And also the reverse of it. Like I'm a casual lecturer here, and so my students from overseas will often email me, you know, Professor Amanda. I'm like, just call me Amanda. You know, but obviously I get why they do it, but I don't like that. Like I'm no different. You know, I don't think I'm any better than they are. And that's how it feels. It feels like it's a superiority thing to have that high power distance. I don't like it.
But for them,
yes, they're showing respect. Yes.
They're doing what they've been taught to show respect to you.
Yeah.
And I do think that no matter how weird it feels, like this is the stuff of cultural intelligence is allowing them to do that, right? And certainly you can take moments and explain. In Australia, this is really our perspective on power distance.
Yeah.
And then leave it, because I've heard people from other cultures around the world say how this is so difficult for them to be casual with others.
It makes sense.
Because it's antithetical to how they were raised, right?
Yeah. I have students that are like in Dubai and Singapore and they're staying there. They're studying through our campuses there. And so I would never say this to them, but to the ones who are here and they're trying to get permanent residency in Australia, if you address people over formally in the workplace in Australia, you're almost ridiculed. It's an interesting one, but yes. It's interesting to make me reflect on that too and how I deal with it.
Yeah, and that's true. And so, and you're smart to not have the students from Dubai and the other locations And you're smart to coach the ones who are going to be in Australia because, again, this is the point of cultural
Yes.
intelligence, right? Is that you're adapting where you are and the people you're around. And so that is an appropriate thing to tell them and to coach them on, I
Yes,
think.
but I've never really thought it through like properly. So this is very useful to actually, I'm running on instinct without thinking, is this the right thing or not? So
Exactly. You're describing exactly why I started this business. Like, let's describe this for you so you can have a good strategy,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, then I kind of have some rules in my head that make sense.
And then, someday maybe just allowing somebody to show you a little more deference than you're comfortable with and just letting it slide.
Yes, I should get better at that. As you can hear, I'm learning a lot through this process. Our debrief continued then through a bunch of other behavioural differences. And then to finish up, we looked at my results across some overall cultural intelligence areas. There's 4 in this model: my drive, knowledge, strategy, and ability to take action. So I imagine, reflecting on these results, because I've spent lots of time living and working in other countries and decades teaching students from all over the world as well, my confidence and my drive to learn about and kind of adapt to diverse or new cultural settings was pretty high. An interesting part was my knowledge, which was high for cultural systems and values and norms, but low for leadership. I guess kind of makes sense considering my background, but interesting to discuss. And then we discussed CQ strategy, cultural intelligence strategy, which I had honestly never explicitly thought about ever.
CQ strategy. So that is, the extent to which you are aware of what's going on in a multicultural situation and the extent to which you check and plan accordingly. So first is the planning. So strategizing before a culturally diverse encounter. So you're like, okay, I'm going to meet with a bunch of people from Kazakhstan. How might I try to understand? And I really did this once because I was going to meet a group of people from Kazakhstan. I was like, what should I learn about Kazakhstan? What should I know? Like, what are some things that I might want to try? How might I want to adapt my behavior before I go in?
Yeah.
Maybe look at a map, that type of stuff. I'm planning, I'm preparing. And then awareness is the sensing the perspectives of self and others during the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you get the before, during, and after, right? When you're in the moment, you are interacting with people, you're paying attention to how this person's acting, how that person's acting, how you yourself are acting and feeling about the situation, and kind of filing it away and maybe trying to adjust in the moment if you can. And then checking when you're done, checking your assumptions, adjusting your mental maps if the experience differed from your expectations, right? Or maybe something like one of your assumptions came up and you were like, oh, actually, that was wrong. I assumed something that was wrong. And that was a mistake that I made. And I need to adjust that understanding, adjust my cultural knowledge after a misunderstanding and go from there and figure it all out again.
Yep,
so it's like the
this
before,
makes
the during, and the
absolute
after.
sense to me that I'm relatively low because this is really my approach is just to go in without thinking and then, which is terrible. Well, I think I said this earlier, like this is what I would, this is an aim is to be more deliberate about it. So if I walked into a room and I had a bunch of Japanese students, I would know how to behave because of past experience, but I wouldn't think about it before I go in, but I could do it well because of past experience. Whereas if I go in, funnily enough, I did have a Kazakhstani student recently who was quite unusual and had some issues with the class because he was didn't fit in very well and stuff. And I didn't didn't think ahead or plan or any of that. And I could have handled that situation much better had I approached it differently. Yeah, definitely my biggest learning from my chat with Renae is that for me, it's not just about learning the knowledge about cultural differences, but also explicitly planning how to use that knowledge. That's something I really want to do more of. Just to finish off, Renae talked me through the 4 CQ capabilities again, now that I had my kind of own personal context and results. So through drive, knowledge, action and strategy, and examining how each of these more carefully is basically the path to increasing our cultural intelligence skills.
They all feed into each other. And they have, activities and things like that to help get people to think about what they want to do to improve particular aspects of their CQ. Because again, you don't need to change your cultural values. That's something that will remain the same. It's just a matter of adapting. They talk about a few key questions to consider when determining how much to adapt. Sometimes it's, we talked about Japan, sometimes you don't always need to like adapt to their social norms. They're more flexible with the people who are external, right? But there's a difference. There's a tight culture and a loose culture. You know, the tight culture is one where everyone's expected to adhere to the dominant social norms. So Japan or Saudi Arabia, deviating from the dominant norms is not advantageous. A loose culture is a place like New York City or Shanghai or Melbourne, probably, you know, some of the bigger cities where there's much less need to adapt to the social norms. And so then you got to consider, like, how can I express my intentions? So if you want to demonstrate confidence, do you want to demonstrate respect or credibility? Are you trying to come across as professional? What does the situation call for? And what would be the best way to approach communicating that? It's not enough to just be like, well, I'll just be respectful.
Yeah.
Because
it's a different thing wherever you are.
So thinking about, you know, what are your intentions? And then also thinking like, am I compromising myself? You know, especially, you know, some of these values, you can really compromise yourself if you...
With some extremes.
Can be like an ethical violation. If you, or something you're really uncomfortable with doing. And so that's why like some of these like, you know, the effective expression, like those are easy. But sometimes like universalism versus particularism, that can be much more complicated. So when is it ethical to not adapt? Strategically, you may choose to adapt and maybe taken offensively, but you have to take a stand for whatever reason, right? And then when will retaining the difference actually make us stronger, right? Because the benefit of diversity, like you can really gain the benefit of diversity with the CQ model. Is like you can get everyone's opinions and thoughts in, and then sometimes it may be more helpful to conform to the social norm for whatever reason. And so it can sort of depend on your situation to consider like what's the value added and what's the source of conflict, right?
The pros and cons of changing or not changing or adapting in some way or not. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's all about the intention, the knowledge and the intentionality, really, isn't it? And that's what I've never really thought about at all, but it makes so much sense when you explain it. So that's just a brief insight into our session, which lasted a couple of hours, but I hope that that's given you a flavour to what cultural intelligence is all about. If you, like me, hadn't really given it much explicit thought before, it certainly opened my eyes a lot. I've always loved identifying cultural differences when I've lived in other countries or when I've taught classes with different nationalities here in Perth. I've often asked them lots of questions. And even still now, I often do this at a university level. We have a huge number of international students here in Perth. It's one of our key industries. But I have never been particularly proactive about how I use what I learn. So I have lots of ideas now from my chat with Renae. Thank you, Renae. And thank you all for listening to episode 374 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. If you want to know more about Renae and her business Beyond Tourism, cultural travel and training, you can go to goingbeyondtourism.com for lots of info. And Renae also puts great snippets, short videos about these topics on Instagram and TikTok. On Instagram, she's at Going Beyond Tourism or TikTok Beyond_tourism. I'll leave links in the show notes to those as well as to the Facebook and LinkedIn groups for thoughtful travellers. Come and join us there and chat about your thoughts on cultural intelligence. Don't forget to sign up for the Thoughtful Travellers newsletter, thoughtfultravel.substack.com. So these links and more you can find at notaballerina.com/374. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.